On the afternoon of October 13, 1972, a Uruguayan Air Force Fairchild FH-227D aircraft, Flight 571, took off from Carrasco International Airport in Montevideo, Uruguay. The flight was supposed to be a short trip, carrying 45 passengers, members of the Old Boys Rugby Club, their families, and friends, to Santiago, Chile. None of them could have predicted that this flight would become one of the most harrowing survival stories in modern history. The plane climbed into the sky, its passengers full of excitement, ready for a weekend rugby match. However, just as they neared the Andes mountain range, a storm began to form. Severe turbulence shook the aircraft as it entered thick clouds. The crew, struggling to maintain control, realized they were flying into a deadly storm. In the chaos of high winds, the plane lost altitude rapidly and began to plummet. At 4:30 p.m., the aircraft crashed into the rugged Andes mountains at nearly 12 feet. The sound of the impact was deafening, as metal crumpled and glass shattered. The wreckage scattered across the snow-covered slopes of the mountains, leaving the survivors in a nightmare of confusion and chaos. In the aftermath of the crash, 12 people were killed instantly, including the pilot and co-pilot. The rest of the survivors were left in the cold, trying to comprehend their situation. The mountains, with their jagged peaks and unforgiving weather, were now their prison. As the survivors gathered their bearings, they realized they were stranded in one of the most remote, inhospitable places on Earth. Their only shelter was the shattered remains of the plane, and there was no sign of rescue. The wreckage offered them little hope. The radio was damaged, and no one knew exactly where they had crashed. The mountain range stretched out endlessly in every direction, offering no promise of help. For the next few days, the survivors tried desperately to stay alive. They searched the wreckage for anything that might help them: blankets, first aid kits, food, but there was little to find. The days passed with biting cold and constant fear. As they sat in the wreckage, they heard no signs of search planes. The only sound was the wind howling through the peaks of the Andes. By the fourth day, the survivors realized that their situation was even more dire than they initially thought. They had no food or water, and the cold was unbearable. They rationed what little they had, but it wasn't enough to sustain them. Desperation began to set in. They knew that if help didn't come soon, they would all die in the mountains. It was at this point that the survivors were forced to make a horrific decision, one that would haunt them forever. With no food and no other choice, they began to consume the bodies of those who had died in the crash. It was a choice driven by survival, a decision that no one could ever imagine making, but it was the only thing that kept them alive. They did what they had to do to survive, but the psychological toll was immense. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of rescue. The survivors kept hope alive, clinging to the belief that somehow, someone would find them. But as the days wore on, they faced the grim reality that no one was coming. The rescuers would not know where to look. They had no idea where the plane had gone down. After more than a week of waiting and with supplies running dangerously low, a group of survivors decided to take matters into their own hands. Two men, Fernando Parado and Roberto Canessa, volunteered to embark on a treacherous journey to find help. The pair set off into the wilderness, with nothing but a rudimentary map of the area and their will to survive. The journey was grueling. The snow was deep, and the terrain was treacherous. The men faced freezing temperatures, hunger, and exhaustion as they pushed forward, hoping that somehow they would find civilization. They trekked for days without food, surviving on what little water they could find in the snow. The pain of their journey was unimaginable, but they did not stop. They pushed forward, determined to save their friends. Finally, after 10 days of walking through the vast expanse of snow and rock, they encountered a shepherd in the remote Andes. It was the first sign of human life they had seen since the crash. The shepherd, stunned by their appearance, helped them get word to authorities. A rescue mission was launched immediately. On December 23, 1972, 72 days after the crash, the remaining survivors were finally rescued. Fernando Parado and Roberto Canessa had made the impossible journey, and their bravery had brought the survivors back from the brink of death. 16 people, out of the 45 who had been on board, had made it out alive. The story of Flight 571 became a symbol of the unyielding strength of the human spirit. The survivors had faced unimaginable odds: harsh conditions, starvation, physical trauma, and the emotional toll of their decisions, but they had persevered. In the face of overwhelming adversity, they had fought to survive. Their story was one of profound sacrifice, unimaginable courage, and an unbreakable will to live. It serves as a powerful reminder of the lengths to which people will go to survive and the incredible resilience of the human spirit in the most dire of circumstances. Though the ordeal would forever mark their lives, the survivors emerged from the Andes with a deeper understanding of the fragility of life and the strength of human perseverance. They had survived against all odds, and their story would be remembered for generations to come as one of the greatest tales of survival in history.